Thanks everyone for tuning in to check out our podcast today, Maker Connect. My name is Matt Despins and I'll be your host for the show. With me today, we actually have Marcos Mendez, and who's a partner here at the firm, and I have the unique opportunity today to speak directly to Marcos to kind of hear his feedback. One of the things that we're going to be chatting about today is the Maker Group offers a training side of the house. And then in addition to that, we have some really hyper-focused project tasks on the consulting side of the business. That's where Marcos spends a lot of his time. I mean, he certainly is involved in many parts of the business, but the consulting side is really where he shines. So I want to first welcome Marcos onto the show. So welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you, Matt.
Yeah, happy to have you. So with that being said, Marcos, as I just mentioned, let's dive in for a minute and talk about first starting with some of the differences between the consulting and the training side of the business and what you're seeing that play out like with our clients.
Yeah. I think the word you used of hyper-focus, Matt, obviously the methodology, the tools, the principles that we teach in our programs are rooted in real-world application. They're rooted in things that we've done with clients over the years. So the methodology, the approach, the ethos of what we do is similar. I think what's different about a workshop environment versus a strategic engagement, think of it as the laboratory environment versus, the natural world. In the laboratory environment, we can control the conditions. We're really focused on you learning principles, being able to digest the process that we teach so you can take that and apply it in your day-to-day. In the consulting side of our business, we get into a real world challenge that your business, your company, your organization is trying to solve. And we help translate some of that methodology that we teach on our programs and bring it to life with the consulting part of our offering.
Interesting. So it makes sense if you think about it conceptually. So really those core principles and foundations and strategies that we're giving and the Maker framework in our training on the consulting side, that's where kind of rubber's hitting the road, right? That's where we've got teams and companies that are calling us to say, hey, not in theory anymore. We have an actual need that we need you to come in for. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's right. And I always look for like analogies or metaphors. And, I think one thing is think about like cooking, right? We've all tried to maybe cook or use a recipe and apply it. There's the black and white details of like, okay, I know these core steps in order to follow to make this meal. But then when you go to do it, you get into like, am I cutting these the right size? Like they don't really give a lot of guidance here. I need to know that. Is my oil hot enough? Is my pan too big, too small? Like you get into these like more nuanced challenges, and that's where our experience comes in as, in this case, like a chef. We can work you through each step of the way and make sure you're applying those principles in the way intended. And let's be honest, Matt, like nothing in negotiation is black and white. So sometimes we're having to operate a lot in that gray area. And it's a fun place to apply, like I said, the methodology and the principles that we teach.
Yeah, that real world stuff where things are kind of changing in the moment. Now, obviously, we've talked a number of times and by the way, in your cooking analogy, I don't have those problems with Domino's pizza. They just usually works out better than for, but we talk a lot about the differences between the movie type negotiations where it's, happening instantaneously. But in these take us through, Marcos, what a typical scenario might look like in a real world consulting. So client X, either a new client or an existing partner, calls us up and says, we have this going on. The email gets transferred over to our partner, Marcos Mendez. What happens next?
Yeah, I mean, the first part of that is a conversation, Matt, with the client, brief, phone or video chat to get underneath, okay, what is it that you're in the midst of or what you're planning to engage on? What are some of the challenges and why are you maybe looking for help, or what areas are giving you some heartburn or some concern? So the first stop is always a call to get further details, to get some understanding. And what we like to do on those conversations after hearing the client challenges, I would say to you, if you're the client, I'd say, okay, Matt, so you've outlined these 3-4 things to me. Here's how we typically help. And what I would do there is outline based on your situation, what that support looks like. And for the most part, Matt, people call us, I would say, 3 big buckets of types of projects. One is a negotiation that's underway, where they're feeling some pain and they're like, hey, I need immediate tactical support. The game, it's halftime right now.
Yep.
Add a few touchdowns and you like come in and help us address it. And in those cases, the answer is yes. But the impact, of course, that we're going to have is going to be limited to, the time constraint we're in. It's better when a client calls us proactively ahead of their negotiation. Hey, this is coming up in the distance. We know you all do some good work here. We want you along for the ride and to help make sure that we can be in the best position possible, because we're getting called in usually on those really significant or complex negotiations that are mission critical. So they know that that's going to be of help. And then the third time that we get called is, I'd call it more of negotiation or sales or infrastructure. And what I mean by that, Matt, is they may not have an immediate problem, but an example there might be, our folks are always negotiating contracts. It's something that is repeated, that we do often. There's bright spots, people who do it very well. There's spots where we're not being very efficient. There's spots where we're spinning our wheels. Can you come in and help us codify a playbook, a methodology for how we do contract negotiations? Because they're not going away, and we want some more consistency and rigor behind how we approach it. So those are the 3 typical areas we get called about. Is I'm in the midst of a negotiation, I need help. I have maybe a broader strategic negotiation coming up. I want you to help part plan and part execute. And the third one is more of that infrastructure or ways of working support.
I love that analogy about the halftime. I imagine that those calls that we get where somebody's in the midst of the negotiation, we're probably getting those calls because things have not gone the way that they had hoped, right? I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we're probably not getting a lot of calls of people like, hey, I feel like I'm doing great in this negotiation. Can you come in? It's probably when, oh man, I don't like where we're at. Can you come help us?
Yeah.
What do you see as, because obviously, like you said, coming in halftime, we're limited because of everything that has been done before our arrival, right? All of that tone, all of that cadence, all of that respect and transparency. So what do you typically like to do coming into that halftime scenario as like an immediate stopgap? Like what are kind of the first things that we think about?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's a deep dive, Matt, on some triage on what has transpired so far.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the pain? Why is it happening? Then I think a really important one is to focus both internally and externally. Our client usually calls us and they're feeling some pain in the conversation they're having with their counterparty. But we start to dive in internal type of questions. Are you all aligned on what success looks like here? Are the boundaries and guardrails to what is in and what's out, what we're willing to do, clear? Who ultimately internally needs to have sign off and involvement on the final outcome? Who's leading it? And what's been the translation of expectations between those? So to me, it's when we get dropped in those halftime situations, it's like an immediate triage of what's going on, starting to sort out where there are external elements to work on, where there are internal elements to work on. And I think being clear on expectations too, right? Sometimes we get called in on those situations and say, given what has transpired, it is unlikely we're going to win this game. Now, we could probably get you to, within a field goal and have a chance, but I'm not going to say we're going to take a 2 touchdown deficit and come out with a blowout win. But there's just not enough time, and what's happened already has put us in a little bit of a tough position. So those are the kind of things we get into, Matt, is being really clear on expectations, being really clear on where to focus our internal and external work, and then defining the work plan and the working relationship. What's this going to look like as far as cadence of how we interact with our client? What's going to be needed as far as input of stakeholders and who should have a seat at the table and be part of the project? So being really explicit with that is important when we get hit with these tough time frames. It's always going to be important in any project, but it becomes laser focused and really rigorous when we get into those mid-cycle type of conversations.
And I imagine too, even if we get called in the middle and let's say that things have not been anywhere close to optimal, even with that remaining time, even if we can't bring them all the way to the victory, even if we can't get them everywhere, I imagine that our involvement can still mitigate some of the damages that they might have otherwise suffered if they didn't get in touch with us. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And, I think one of the things that we take as an approach to our consulting business is we eventually want to get you to a place where the stuff we're teaching you or showing you, we're building organizational muscle. So it's the whole, catch the fish for you versus teach you how to fish.
Mm-hmm.
When we first get engaged with clients on the consulting side, we're going to have our hands on the wheel a bit more just because there's work that needs to be done to establish expectations, methodology, ways of working. So this starts to become systemized. And as we grow in that relationship, we start to take our hands off the wheel as our clients start to emerge with that capability. So one of the things that we talk about a lot with clients is, it's a journey. They get their folks trained. They may have us come in to help them. And you're not going to necessarily nail it the first go. But if you have a journey where there are multiple interactions, multiple chances for people to put this into practice, it starts to become part of the way the organization operates and they own it. And that's a really great place to be when we see that transformation with the client.
Let's ask one more question about this inter-negotiation involvement here, and then we'll transition. But a big part, I know this from our podcast and listening to, you and some of the experts, that a big impediment sometimes to an optimal outcome in a negotiation, everybody thinks about it as the opposing party, the counterparty. But a lot of times a big part of that can be the internal negotiations going on. And so do you typically see that when a client is not having it, they're in the middle of a negotiation, not really where they want to be, and you come in and diagnose it, do you often see that a big part of it is a lack of that internal alignment?
Yeah, I would say, Matt, in my experience, I bet 60 to 70% of my effort with clients is spent internally focused.
Wow.
And the reason why, and I'm not saying negotiating internally, I'm saying aligning internally. Think about it this way. If you're engaged with a external party in a negotiation and there's uncertainty of who the buck stops with internally, there's uncertainty of what we are willing to do or not willing to do. There's uncertainty on when we might escalate, when we might change our strategy. It just makes it really hard for that frontline negotiator to be confident and to execute well. And it's a bit of a paradigm shift that they got to think about. Yes, you want to think about all the questions you have for your party. You want to think about the proposal that's going out the door. You want to think about how you're going to manage the interaction and maintain a relationship as you're negotiating. So that is all important. But if you don't have those questions I just framed up clear, if there's not real clarity internally, expectations set, clear roles of who's doing what, those type of things, while maybe not as exciting to talk about before you get out and engage, it's where negotiations are won and lost. It's where we see a team that's strong and aligned and can face some adversity and some pressure versus a team that is not aligned, and the slightest amount of pressure creates a ton of swirl, a ton of challenge, and a ton of preventable emergencies because of that lack of alignment.
Something just occurred to me here, and for the listeners to know, as I pointed out before, I'm very, very, very novice as a negotiator compared to the folks that I work with. I'm learning every day, but I am a bit of a logical thinker. And, something tells me that if you went to a revenue leader a CFO or what have you who maybe wasn't totally in touch with what his team was negotiating about, and you said to him or her, hey, do you want to know everything about the other side? Like, would you like to know how much they value this, who's making the decisions, what their escalation strategy is? Do you want to know that? They'd be like, yeah, I want to know that, right? So it's interesting that here we have, talking about internal alignment, here we have a scenario where you have that information. It's your company. So it seems kind of funny that we seek something from the counterparty that maybe we should be focusing, like you're saying, Marcos, a lot more on what we're doing internally because we have access to those answers. Is that right?
That's it. And we have a methodology we deploy, whether it's, mid negotiation or we have more time. We call it our maker group readiness assessment.
Mm-hmm.
What that readiness assessment does, it sees 5 key focus areas that we consider you've checked the box on some of this internal alignment, the key questions that will trip up the front line as we get there. None of it, Matt, as you digest that readiness list, none of it is anything all that innovative or surprising to anybody. They're all logical steps. I think what gets people in the most trouble is there's complexity, both in internal stakeholders and external. There's time pressure, the stakes are high, and people just start moving quick without taking a minute to prep. I'll go back to my cooking analogy. I don't know why.
Yeah, what do you do?
On a culinary mindset, but let's go back to that recipe we talked about, right?
Yeah.
A home chef that might maze out all their prep work. So let me chop those up, put them in a bowl, put that away, clean my station. Let me have my spices already pre-measured. Now when I get into the heat of it and the fire's on and something's sizzling, it's like add the onion, boom, I just dump the entire thing. There's a reason we do that on TV, right? When you see the morning shows and they're baking something, everything pre-measured, they just pour the thing out. They're not having to do some prep in the moment. And think about how much more confident and effective and efficient you are when you've done that prep work. Because when that recipe, you get to that line, it says, now do this. Great. I'm glad I already poured that soy sauce and I know what a tablespoon looks like, versus running to get it out of the fridge, running to get your measuring spoon, pouring it out. Meanwhile, your dish is burning, right? And I think that's the way we think about some of this stuff, is that prep work that seems maybe mundane or seems fundamental. It's important. And when you get into the heat of the moment, you're going to need that to rely on. And that's a big focal point of the work that we do with our clients.
Interesting. It's actually a really good analogy too, because it is the little things that make a difference in your analogy, cooking and right, like having everything where all you got to do is turn a bowl upside down, like onions. I don't need to go find the onion, and then I cutting the onion and I drop it on the ground, and it's all these things. You're removing variables.
That's it.
Right.
And you're guesswork, Matt. Like you're removing some of the guesswork of, okay, I don't know that I am going to face this moment in a negotiation, but I do know, because we did this during our readiness moment, is if we get to this roadblock, I'm going to call this person and take this action. And then when you get there and you're freaking out, you're like, oh my God, I'm under pressure. This happened. We say, okay, well, what did we say we would do if we got to that moment? We'd say we call this person, take this X action. Let's do it. Let's live into what that plan was. And I don't want to paint the picture, Matt, that we can choreograph every element of a negotiation, because it's a living, breathing thing.
Yep.
That said, the more you're having to improvise, gain alignment again, is this good? Would we consider this in the moment? The more stress it adds to the overall process. So again, if we can stress test some of that thinking ahead of time and be really clear about how we're going to operate when we get to these friction points, it gives everyone more clarity of what to expect when we get there.
And I know that there's different levels of engagement with our new platform and our tool Maker Connect. Some of our clients are utilizing it, others are kind of warming up to it as we go. I know you've had some experience with it a little bit in terms of planning and whatnot. Generally speaking, what are you finding for the client feedback in terms of, like you're talking about, setting up these what ifs and guardrails and looking at data leverage points? What are you generally hearing about the Maker Connect? The same name as this podcast, by the way.
Yeah. I think the platform we try to do, Matt, is we've tried to bake into it those core elements that we see as necessary to plan and execute a negotiation. So we're giving you the blueprint, and depending on the client's, call it experience with our methodology, their experience in putting it into work, they might be able to do that on their own using that framework. Right? They might call us here and there and say, there's these couple elements that we see some pinch points. Can you help us and guide us on how we can better put this into action? So again, the elements are there. The clients who are using it extensively and more comfortable with the platform are able to work through a lot more of that on their own. And I think one of the things, I go back to the whole fishing thing, is walking you through that process as your co-pilot, as your support behind the scenes. I do that once with you, Matt. Not to say you don't have to ever call me again, but you're like, okay, I know what good looks like for each of these steps. I know how it was applied in a real world scenario. And I know how I was trained on it in a workshop. I feel pretty good about doing the majority of this. So again, like you said, various levels of maturity as far as adopting and putting that into place. And it's going to be a journey that depends on a lot of different dynamics at each client.
Yeah, we know about learning in general, whether it's a language or any new skill. The more ways you're immersed in it, the better you learn it, right? And so what I'm hearing here is that, Maker approaches that from a lot of different angles. There is the training, there is the consulting, and like you mentioned, that consulting working out a muscle, they're getting better and better and better with it. And then Maker Connect, that platform. So really we're approaching it from a lot of different angles, and then being fully available to the client even after the training, should they need anything, right? I mean, I'm sure you get some of those calls on a regular basis. I mean, you and us as a team, highly sought after by a lot of these folks. Is that right, on an ongoing basis?
No, I think that's right, Matt. The approach we're trying to take with our clients is not a, one tool solves their problem. We're trying to bring a suite of solutions that all work within each other. And we may lean into some areas more with one client versus another based on their needs, but you named it, from our training to our online platform, to our advisory and strategic coaching, even, some of the smaller learning things we're doing, like micro learning videos or a master class, these embedding type of things. The idea is, if someone, has a 2-year journey on their growth as a negotiator, and some of it looks like formal training, some of it looks like self-led training, some of it looks like a real world application, at the end of that 2-year journey, they're going to be a lot more adept with the methodology, with the approach, than, hey, let's say you do a training for a couple of days and you got everything you need. So that's the approach we're trying to take with it.
Marcos, you have a pretty extensive background in negotiations. I'd love to first hear you take just a second and talk about that. But I'm really fascinated to know, in interacting with you since the time that I've been here, you're somebody who clearly has a passion for this. You enjoy it. Not where did it come from, like, when I was a kid, but like, what do you enjoy the most about negotiating, now and also in your previous roles?
Yeah. You know what is funny about that question, Matt? I think my love for negotiating, I'm a middle child.
Yep. Okay.
3 brothers, and I often played that role in the middle, like most people are aware of. So I think some of my natural skills and innate skills started getting honed there. But what I am drawn to most about negotiation, I think it's 2 pillars. One is communication. One is problem solving. Okay, so communication, one thing that just makes me tick and that I am energized by doing is coming into a situation that might be complex, that might be hard to get your arms around, and saying, okay, how do we simplify this in a way that makes it digestible so we can go and do it? And whether that's the internal alignment stuff that I talked about earlier, or that's how do I engage my customer differently by being really clear about my expectations and controlling the process and managing the process. So part of it is effective communication. Then the second part is problem solving. And, I think now more than ever, the days of a negotiation where I'm going to get mine and I'm going to look to maximize my side here and that's that, it doesn't work, right? The nature of the business that our clients are dealing with, the scale of what they're operating with, and the repeated nature of their relationships, you got to be really good at, yes, challenging, yes, being tough, yes, pushing for value, but also keep it in mind the infinite game. Keep it in mind that it's not a one and done conversation. And
not a sprint.
That problem solving mentality, right? Being able to come to a negotiation and saying, okay, I am not here to win. I am not here to compete with Matt. I am here to solve a problem. I have my needs. I have my challenges. I have areas where I'm flexible, areas where my hands are tied. Matt's the same way. How do we work this puzzle together and make this work for our business so we can have a sustainable and durable relationship? So to me, Matt, those are the two things that I really, enjoy about this is the communication elements of it, the problem solving elements of it. And then, my mom was a teacher. My dad coached us all growing up in sports. And I do think there's a natural teacher coach there as well that just draws me to the role that I'm in now and advising our clients that I do enjoy. One of the things that I tell people, the old quote, when one teaches, two learn, that can't be more true than Matt. Like the career that I've had, delivering workshops, advising our clients, I take so much away from each one of those projects, each one of those engagements. So I really do get a kick out of it. It is something that I'm energized by.
I saw that in our very first meeting when Marcos and I first met for an introduction call when I was new, and I got off that call and just being honest, I was like, wow, he's a very good communicator, very much cerebral, very logical, and I can see how you can apply those for the clients. Marcos, prior to the Maker Group, to whatever degree you're comfortable, what were some of the other roles that you had? And by the way, this is me asking you here, so you can brag a little bit. It's totally on me. It's not on you.
Yeah. I would say pretty traditional post-college sales career path.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent the first 9 years of my career working directly for consumer goods manufacturers. So started with Philip Morris in a territory sales manager role, carrying a sales bag, going, door to door on C-store, bodega, independent grocers in the tobacco space. So that was a great learning experience. They really invested a lot in sales training, great place to start your career.
Yep.
From there, I transitioned to a role, someone I worked with actually in the past pulled me over to Hershey. Again, still in the same sales management role, leading sales teams, building out sales process, sales capability. So that was the first part of my career. And then post MBA, Matt, I had this inflection point where I went over to consulting. So my first consulting gig out of business school was with a company called Infosys. They are a big system integrator, do a lot in the process and technology space. But I was still in the CPG and retail world. So there, really great breadth of experience helping our retail and consumer goods clients at the time solve process challenges. So grew a lot there. Interestingly enough, negotiation was starting to really become this thing in my forefront of my mind. Seeing, a system integrator obviously is in the middle usually of these big process and tech implementations.
Yep.
So there's the actual, like SAP that is the technology. There's the, client, whichever big company you want to name, and the SIs in the middle, and just kind of seeing how those relationships are managed, how the deals are managed. It's like, wow, there's a lot to this. And then, I got a call from a recruiter, Matt, that I almost didn't take, but he was really persistent. And that led me to my previous stop, which was the Gap partnership. Learned a ton there about negotiation, learned a ton there about how to really advise clients, and I gotta build out some capability there in the strategic part of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, my time here at the Maker Group, been heavily involved on the consulting side. So it's been a journey, and I would say each one of those steps, if I look back, did teach me something that I can bring to my day to day in this role. So I'm grateful for all those steps along the way.
Yeah. So, being a partner here at the Maker Group, and you have so much negotiation experience, including with other negotiating firms, not speaking about anybody else, but speaking about what do you love that the Maker Group does, either about their approach to negotiations, their methodology. And so we'll kind of wrap it up with that. But I want to hear, what is your favorite part of what we do that you think separates us from anybody else in the competition?
Yeah. I would say it goes back to what I shared a little while ago, Matt,
Mm-hmm.
but what I really like about what we do is a truly holistic approach where we are building out commercial capability in negotiation and the adjacent spaces. Again, where that's training folks in a formal way, developing self-led and interactive digital ways of learning, which is, a big ask of our clients right now of how do we do things in more bite-sized and repeated chunks, or, advising and coaching. So bringing a real holistic view to it is one. And the other one that I would use the word, Matt, I would say a modern approach to negotiation. And, to me, modern has a few little branches. One is the technology. Yes, our technology and our platform, the technology that our clients use, even in our training programs, really invest in that. Another thing of modern, I think, is our methodology. Again, we bring a problem-solving, process-based approach to negotiation. It's not just about the behavioral elements of how good are you in at the virtual or in-person table. It's about the planning and the process behind that. And I think also modernization at the third branch is just the types of solutions that we're bringing to our clients are built for purpose in the complex and modern world that they're operating in. So that's what I really enjoy about the client, the way that we go to market with our clients.
Yeah, and in a very, like you pointed out, a very modern, flexible, kind of dynamic way, right? We really approach this as a individual thing where each client has needs, and we're going to be super adaptable. Is it adaptable a word that you've also seen used quite a bit?
I think that's a great word. And, I think what we've learned over the years is each client is at a different point in their journey when it comes to commercial capability.
Yep.
And the areas you need to lean into to really help them. You got to listen. It's the same stuff we teach in our programs, right? You got to ask good questions. You got to really listen to the answers and try to develop solutions that fit some of those issues or those components. So we try to practice what we preach here and put those same things into action. And, a problem-solving, adaptable approach is what's needed right now.
Okay, Marcos, it's been amazing having you. But before I let you go, I want to ask you one thing. So we talked a lot about dinner preparation earlier. Do you have any dinner plans already for tonight? Do you have everything already laid out, or are we going to kind of do something different tonight?
Oh, that's a good question. So, we're in the summer holiday season.
Yeah.
I'm going to attempt to smoke some beef ribs for the first time. I got my brisket recipe is nailed down. My process is nailed down. So I'm going to try something new, which is beef ribs, and we'll see how it goes.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, everybody, this is Marcos Mendez, one of the partners here at the firm at the Maker Group, and this is Maker Connect. Thank you all for joining in.